Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Oak Ridge, Colorado was the kind of small town where everyone knew everyone. The kind of place where doors remained unlocked at night and children played freely in tree-lined streets until dusk called them home. Until May 18, 2002, the day that shattered that illusion forever. Sarah Anderson's scream cut through the peaceful Saturday morning like a knife. The single mother had gone to wake her daughter Lily for their weekend tradition of pancakes and cartoons. Instead, she found an empty bed, the covers pulled back, and the bedroom window opened just wide enough for a slender 12-year-old girl to slip through. "Lily!" Sarah called out, racing through their modest two-story home, checking every room, every closet. Her heart hammered against her ribs as panic rose in her throat. "Lily, honey, where are you?" The house answered with silence. Sarah's trembling fingers dialed 911 as she stood in her daughter's bedroom doorway. Lily's favorite stuffed rabbit lay abandoned on the floor. The wind gently lifted the lace curtains, and Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. There were scuff marks on the windowsill. 911, what's your emergency? "My daughter," Sarah choked out. "My daughter is gone." Across the street, Leonard Collins peered through his living room blinds at the sudden arrival of police cars. The 52-year-old bachelor adjusted his glasses and frowned at the commotion. When he saw Sarah Anderson on her front porch, sobbing into her hands as an officer gently questioned her, something shifted in his pale blue eyes. Within hours, the quiet town of Oak Ridge mobilized. Volunteers gathered at the community center, organized into search parties by Sheriff Mike Donovan, a weathered man with 30 years on the force who'd never faced anything like this in their peaceful community. Lily Anderson is 12 years old, approximately 5 feet tall. With long brown hair and green eyes, he announced to the crowd. She was last seen wearing pink pajamas with white clouds. She's been missing since sometime last night. Leonard Collins stood in the back of the room, arms crossed over his chest. When they called for volunteers, he was among the first to raise his hand. "I live right across from the Andersons," he explained to the group leader. "I've known Lily since she was little. I want to help." As the day wore on, searchers combed the woods behind the Anderson home. They checked the creek where local kids swam in summer, the abandoned train tracks, and the old Miller barn on the edge of town. By nightfall, there was no sign of Lily. Sarah stood on her porch, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders despite the warm May evening. She watched as flashlights bobbed in the distance, volunteers calling her daughter's name into the darkness. Leonard approached, carrying a thermos. "It's just tea," he said softly, offering it to her. "I thought you might need something." "Thank you," Sarah whispered, her voice hoarse from crying. "I just don't understand. She wouldn't run away." Leonard placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll find her, Sarah. The whole town is looking." As he turned to leave, his eyes drifted to the upstairs window, Lily's bedroom, and something dark flickered across his face, gone so quickly it might never have been there at all. That night, as Sarah sat alone in her daughter's room, clutching Lily's rabbit to her chest, she made a promise. "I will find you," she whispered into the darkness. "No matter what it takes, I will bring you home." What she couldn't know was how close Lily actually was, and how the truth would shake their community to its very core. The morning after Lily's disappearance dawned with a cruel brightness that seemed to mock Sarah's despair. She hadn't slept, keeping vigil by the phone that never rang, jumping at every creak in the old house, hoping against hope that her daughter would simply walk through the door with some innocent explanation. Sheriff Donovan arrived early, his police cruiser kicking up dust as it pulled into the driveway. His weathered face betrayed his concern as he approached the porch where Sarah waited. "Any news?" she asked, though the answer was written in his tired eyes. "Nothing yet," he admitted, removing his hat. "But I've called in state resources. We've got dogs coming in from Denver, and the FBI's been notified." Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold it together. "Someone took her, Mike. Lily wouldn't just leave." The sheriff nodded slowly. "I believe you, Sarah. We're treating this as an abduction now." Inside the house, officers dusted for fingerprints around Lily's window. They bagged her hairbrush for DNA samples and photographed the scuff marks on the sill. Sarah answered endless questions about Lily's friends, her routine, any changes in behavior. Had she seemed troubled lately? Was there anyone new in her life? Anyone who'd shown an unusual interest in the girl? "What about her father?" one of the detectives asked. Sarah shook her head. "Robert left when she was 3. He's in Seattle now, remarried. They barely keep in touch." By afternoon, Lily's school picture was being distributed throughout town. Flyers with her smiling face and the word missing in bold red letters appeared on storefronts, telephone poles, and community bulletin boards. Local news vans parked along the street, reporters delivering solemn updates against the backdrop of the Anderson home. Leonard Collins watched the commotion from his porch, a cup of coffee cooling in his hands. When a young officer approached with flyers, Leonard accepted one gravely. "Such a terrible thing," he said, studying Lily's photograph. "I've known her since she was just a little thing. Always so polite, always smiling." "Did you notice anything unusual recently, sir?" the officer asked. Any strangers in the neighborhood, any disturbances last night? Leonard furrowed his brow in concentration. Nothing comes to mind. I'm a bit of a night owl, always reading late, but I didn't hear anything out of the ordinary. The officer made a note. If you think of anything, please call the station immediately. Of course, Leonard replied earnestly. I want to help any way I can. Sarah's all alone in this world except for Lily. He hesitated, then added, I'll be joining the search again today. That poor woman needs all the support we can give her. The search expanded. Volunteers waded through the creek, checking under bridges and culverts. Others walked in long lines through the woods, calling Lily's name. Police interviewed every registered sex offender within a 50-mile radius. The FBI established a command center at the elementary school where agents pored over maps and analyzed tips that poured in from the hotline. Robert Anderson, Lily's father, arrived from Seattle that evening, his new wife waiting nervously in their rental car as he approached his former home for the first time in years. Sarah barely recognized him when she opened the door. Robert, she said flatly. I came as soon as I heard, he explained, shifting uncomfortably on the porch. Is there any news? Nothing, Sarah replied, the weight of that single word crushing. Their conversation was interrupted by Leonard carrying a casserole dish across the street. Oh, excuse me, he said, recognizing the tension. I just thought you might need something to eat, Sarah. People have been dropping off food at my house for you all day. Thank you, Leonard, Sarah said, grateful for the interruption. This is Robert, Lily's father. The two men sized each other up, exchanging terse nods. You're the neighbor? Robert asked. Yes, lived across the street for 15 years now, Leonard replied. I've been helping with the search. Robert's eyes narrowed slightly. Were you home the night she disappeared? Something flickered across Leonard's face, surprise, perhaps, or indignation at the implied accusation. I was, he answered calmly, reading until about 11, then went to bed. Didn't hear a thing, unfortunately. The awkward moment was broken by Sheriff Donovan's arrival with an FBI agent in tow. Sarah, this is Special Agent Catherine Reeves. She's taking lead on Lily's case. Agent Reeves was all business, her dark suit and direct gaze a stark contrast to the small-town informality of Oak Ridge. Mrs. Anderson, we need to go through some detailed questions. Is there somewhere we can talk privately? Inside, Sarah sat at her kitchen table, answering the same question she'd been asked countless times already. But Agent Reeves pressed harder, digging deeper. Is there anyone in Lily's life who pays special attention to her? A teacher, a coach, a family friend? Sarah shook her head, exhaustion evident in every movement. Everyone loves Lily. She's that kind of child. Bright, friendly, but no one inappropriate if that's what you're asking. What about your neighbor, Mr. Collins? Agent Reeves asked, glancing toward the window where Leonard could be seen returning to his house. Leonard? Sarah seemed surprised by the question. He's been nothing but kind to us since we moved here. Helps with yard work sometimes, brings in our mail when we're away. Lily calls him Uncle Len. Agent Reeves made a note. We're looking at everyone, Mrs. Anderson. Even the people who seem helpful can sometimes... Not Leonard, Sarah interrupted firmly. He's searching for Lily right now. He's organizing meals for me, as part of this community. The first week passed in a blur of searching, questioning, and crushing disappointment. As hope began to waver, the media attention intensified. Lily's case was featured on national news, her face appearing on television screens across America. In her darkest moments alone in her house at night, Sarah would slip into Lily's room and sit on her bed, inhaling the fading scent of her daughter's shampoo from the pillow. One night she found a small handwritten note pushed under her front door. Don't give up hope, it read simply. She needs you to stay strong. Sarah recognized Leonard's handwriting from the Christmas cards he sent each year. Clutching the note to her chest, she made a decision. She wouldn't let Lily's room become a shrine. She wouldn't accept that her daughter was gone forever. The next morning she placed a candle in Lily's window. I'll light it every Sunday until you come home, she whispered, striking a match, so you can find your way back to me. Across the street, Leonard Collins watched the small flame flicker to life. Behind his wire-rimmed glasses, his eyes reflected the distant light as a slow, satisfied smile spread across his face. Somewhere beneath his feet, in a room no one knew existed, a child stirred in her sleep. As summer descended on Oak Ridge, the initial frenzy of Lily's disappearance settled into a gnawing, persistent ache. The search parties grew smaller, the FBI presence diminished, and the news vans eventually disappeared to chase fresher tragedies. But for Sarah Anderson, time had stopped on May 18th. Every Sunday, without fail, she lit the candle in Lily's window. She maintained her daughter's room exactly as it had been, the unmade bed, the homework still open on the desk, the novel with a bookmark halfway through. Some whispered it wasn't healthy, this preservation of absence, but Sarah didn't care what they thought. To her, it wasn't a shrine, but a promise. Leonard Collins had become her unexpected rock. When most neighbors grew uncomfortable with her grief, unsure what to say after weeks turned into months, Leonard remained steadfast. He brought dinner every Thursday, mowed her lawn without being asked, and always asked about Lily in the present tense, as if her return was merely delayed, not doubtful. She's a strong girl, he would say, sitting across from Sarah at her kitchen table. Smart, too. Wherever she is, she's thinking about you. On a sweltering August afternoon, 3 months after the disappearance, Robert returned to Oak Ridge. His visit was unannounced, his manner agitated as he pounded on Sarah's door. "I hired a private investigator," he said without preamble when she answered. "The police aren't doing enough." Sarah let him in, noticing how the months had aged him. Deep lines bracketed his mouth, and his eyes held the same haunted look she saw in her own mirror. "What have they found?" she asked, leading him to the living room where Lily's school photos still dominated the mantel. "They're looking into a cousin of mine, Thomas. He was in Colorado around the time Lily disappeared, and he has a record, nothing involving children, but still." Robert ran a hand through his thinning hair. "And they're checking into some of the neighbors." Sarah stiffened. "The police already cleared everyone in the neighborhood, did they?" "Really?" Robert's voice held an edge. "That man across the street, he's always around, isn't he? Always so helpful." "Leonard has been kind to me," Sarah defended. "He's the only one who still talks about finding her, not about closure or moving on." Robert studied her for a moment. "Don't you find that strange? Everyone else has accepted the probability that she's—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "That she's what?" Sarah challenged, anger flaring. "Dead? Is that what you've accepted, Robert? Because I haven't. I won't." Their argument spilled onto the front porch, voices raised enough to draw attention. Across the street, Leonard emerged from his house, ostensibly to collect his mail. His eyes darted toward the Anderson home, where Robert was gesturing emphatically. "I just think you need to consider all possibilities," Robert was saying, his voice carrying in the quiet neighborhood. "Even the ones you don't want to face." "You gave up the right to tell me what to think when you walked out on us 9 years ago," Sarah shot back. Leonard hesitated by his mailbox, clearly listening. When Robert noticed him, he abruptly stopped talking and stared hard at the older man. "Problem, neighbor?" Robert called out, his tone challenging. Leonard adjusted his glasses nervously. "Not at all. Just getting my mail." "Convenient timing," Robert muttered, but Sarah placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Stop it," she hissed. "Leonard has been more supportive than anyone." Robert shook her hand off. "I'm going to talk to him," he announced, already moving down the porch steps. Sarah watched in horror as Robert crossed the street, approaching Leonard with barely contained hostility. Their conversation was brief but intense, with Robert doing most of the talking while Leonard listened, his posture increasingly defensive. After a few minutes, Leonard retreated into his house, and Robert returned, looking troubled. "He says he was home alone the night she disappeared," Robert reported. "No alibi. And did you know he has a finished basement? Said he uses it for storage and hobbies. Asked me if I wanted to see it, but something about how he offered. It felt off." "The police searched every house in the neighborhood," Sarah reminded him tiredly. "Including Leonard's. Did they use cadaver dogs? Did they get a warrant to tear up his floors?" Robert demanded. "Or did they just take a quick look around because he's the helpful neighbor everyone trusts?" Sarah closed her eyes, the weight of endless suspicion crushing her. "Please, Robert. I can't start doubting everyone. I'll go crazy if I do." After Robert left, promising to return with updates from his investigator, Sarah found herself staring across at Leonard's house. It was a mirror image of her own, same basic layout, built by the same developer 30 years ago. The thought of Lily being so close just across the street all this time was too absurd to contemplate. Yet Robert's words had planted a seed of unease. That evening, Leonard appeared at her door with a casserole in an unusually subdued manner. "Your ex-husband doesn't like me much," he observed as she invited him in. Sarah sighed. "Robert is looking for someone to blame. He feels guilty for not being here." Leonard nodded, placing the casserole on the counter. "I understand. If I had a daughter and she went missing." His voice trailed off, and he removed his glasses to clean them with a handkerchief. A nervous habit Sarah had noticed before. "I can't imagine your pain, Sarah." There was something in his tone, something Sarah couldn't quite identify, that made her study him more carefully. In the 3 years they'd been neighbors, she realized she knew very little about Leonard Collins. He rarely had visitors. He kept to himself except for his interactions with her and Lily. "Have you always lived alone, Leonard?" she asked casually. A shadow seemed to pass over his face. "Yes. Never married. My work kept me too busy, I suppose." "What did you do before retirement?" Sarah realized she'd never asked before. "Oh, this and that. Government work, mostly. Classified." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Boring stuff, filing systems, records management." The conversation shifted to town gossip, but Sarah found herself watching Leonard with new awareness. The way his eyes occasionally drifted to Lily's school photo. The slight tremor in his hands when he mentioned her name. The careful way he spoke of her, always using present tense. After he left, Sarah stood in her living room, conflicted. Was she seeing shadows where none existed, influenced by Robert's suspicions? Or had she been blind to something sinister hiding behind the mask of neighborly concern? That night she dreamed of Lily calling for her from somewhere close. So close. She woke gasping, convinced for a moment that her daughter was in the house. The feeling was so strong that she searched room by room, ending in Lily's bedroom where the candle had long since burned out. As she stood by the window, preparing to light a new candle despite it not being Sunday, she noticed a light in Leonard's basement window. It was past midnight, yet he was awake, moving around in a part of his house she'd never seen. The basement window was small, partially obscured by a bush, but definitely illuminated from within. Sarah watched as a shadow passed behind the curtain. Something about the silhouette seemed small, too small for Leonard's tall frame. Her heart began to race. Was she seeing things? Projecting her desperate hope onto ordinary shadows? She was still standing there, frozen with uncertainty, when the basement light switched off. Minutes later, a light came on in Leonard's bedroom upstairs. She could see him moving around, preparing for bed as if nothing was unusual. Sarah backed away from the window, her mind racing. Tomorrow, she decided, she would find a reason to see inside Leonard's basement. She needed to know, one way or another, if Robert's suspicions had merit. What she couldn't know was that her simple decision would set in motion events that would change everything, not just for her but for the entire town of Oak Ridge. In his bedroom across the street, Leonard Collins stood at his own window watching Sarah's house. He smiled to himself, secure in the knowledge that some secrets stay hidden in plain sight, protected by nothing more than the human tendency to trust the familiar. Below him, in a room constructed between the walls of the original basement, a child slept fitfully on a narrow cot, dreaming of sunlight and freedom. The next morning dawned with an oppressive heat that seemed to press down on Oak Ridge like a physical weight. Sarah moved through her house in a daze, the midnight vision of that basement light haunting her thoughts. Was she grasping at shadows, or had she glimpsed something significant? She needed to see inside Leonard's basement, but how? She couldn't simply ask to inspect it. If there was something to hide, such a request would only put him on guard. She needed a pretext, something that wouldn't arouse suspicion. The opportunity presented itself when her kitchen sink began leaking that afternoon. Water pooled beneath the pipes, spreading across the linoleum floor. Sarah mopped it up, then hesitated, an idea forming. She and Leonard shared the same house design and the same aging plumbing. Gathering her courage, she crossed the street and knocked on his door. Leonard answered quickly, as if he'd been waiting nearby. "Sarah," he greeted her with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Is everything all right?" "Actually, I have a bit of a plumbing emergency," she explained, trying to keep her voice casual. "My kitchen sink is leaking badly. Since our houses have the same layout, I was wondering if I could take a look at your pipes, just to see how they're connected before I call a plumber." Something flickered across Leonard's face, hesitation, perhaps, or calculation, but it passed so quickly Sarah might have imagined it. "Of course," he said, stepping back to admit her, "though I'm afraid I'm not much of a handyman myself." Sarah had been in Leonard's house before, but never beyond the living room and kitchen. The interior was meticulously neat, almost sterile. No family photos adorned the walls, no personal mementos cluttered the surfaces. It felt more like a model home than a lived-in space. "The sink is just through here," Leonard said, leading her to a kitchen that mirrored her own. Sarah made a show of examining the plumbing under his sink, aware of Leonard hovering nearby, watching her every move. "The pipes look different from mine," she observed. "Have you had work done?" "Yes, about 5 years ago," Leonard replied. "Had some issues with the main line. They had to replace quite a bit." Sarah straightened up, wiping her hands on her jeans. Now came the tricky part. "In our house, the main water line runs through the basement first," she said casually. "Is yours the same?" Leonard's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. "I believe so. Could I take a quick look? It might help me explain the problem to the plumber." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. Leonard's fingers drummed against his thigh once, twice, before he responded. "I'm afraid my basement is rather a mess right now," he said with a forced chuckle. "I've been meaning to organize it for years. Barely room to walk down there." "I don't mind," Sarah pressed. "I won't judge your clutter." Leonard's smile thinned. "Another time, perhaps? I really should clear a path first. Safety hazard, you know." Sarah felt a chill despite the summer heat. The basement door behind Leonard remained firmly closed, like a boundary he was determined she wouldn't cross. Of course, she conceded, knowing she couldn't push further without raising alarm. "I'll just call the plumber then. Thanks anyway." As Leonard showed her out, his usual warmth seemed diminished, replaced by a watchful caution that made Sarah's skin crawl. At the door, he paused. "How are you holding up, Sarah?" "Really?" he asked, studying her face intently. "One day at a time," she answered automatically. Leonard nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "That's all any of us can do, isn't it? Just take each day as it comes." He hesitated, then added, "I worry about you, you know. All alone in that house, with all those memories." Something in his tone made Sarah's heart race. Was it concern she heard, or something else, something possessive? "I'm fine," she assured him, eager now to leave. "The memories are all I have of Lily." "For now," Leonard said softly, so softly she almost didn't catch it. "Good day, Sarah." The door closed between them, and Sarah hurried back to her own house, her mind racing. Leonard's reluctance to show her the basement might mean nothing. Many people were private about their homes, embarrassed by disorder. Yet combined with the light she'd seen, the shadow that seemed too small, his nervous manner, doubt was hardening into suspicion. She called Robert that evening, speaking in hushed tones as if Leonard might somehow overhear from across the street. "I need to see inside his basement," she told her ex-husband. "Something doesn't feel right." "I'll be there tomorrow," Robert promised. "Don't do anything until I arrive. And Sarah? Don't let Collins know you suspect anything." That night, Sarah barely slept. Every creak of the old house had her bolting upright, imagining footsteps, imagining Leonard somehow aware of her suspicions. She found herself standing at Lily's window again, watching Leonard's house across the street. The basement remained dark, but a light burned in his study until well past midnight. What was he doing in there so late? What secrets did that house hold? Morning brought a thunderstorm that matched Sarah's turbulent thoughts. Rain lashed against the windows as she waited for Robert, jumping at every rumble of thunder. When he finally arrived, accompanied by a stern-faced man he introduced as Davis. The private investigator, Sarah, was nearly frantic with tension. "He wouldn't let me see the basement," she explained, pacing her living room. "And there was something in the way he looked at me, like he was assessing how much I knew what I was thinking." Davis, a former police detective with hard eyes and a no-nonsense manner, asked her pointed questions about Leonard's behavior since Lily's disappearance. Had he ever mentioned details about the case he shouldn't know? Had his story about the night she vanished remained consistent? Did he ever speak about Lily in ways that seemed unusual? "He always talks about her in the present tense," Sarah recalled. "Always says she'd come home someday when most people have given up." "That could be him just being supportive," Davis acknowledged, "or it could be because he knows she's alive." The possibility hung in the air between them, too overwhelming to fully absorb. "We need to get inside that house," Robert said firmly. "When is Collins usually away?" "He goes grocery shopping every Tuesday morning," Sarah replied. "And he has a doctor's appointment this Thursday. He mentioned it last week." Davis shook his head. "Breaking in would contaminate any evidence. If there's something to find, we need to do this legally." He pulled out his phone. "I have contacts at the state police. Let me make some calls, see if we can get them to take another look at Collins." But as the day wore on, it became clear that the authorities weren't going to act based on Sarah's gut feeling and a light in a basement window. Without concrete evidence, there was nothing to justify a search warrant. "Then we'll get evidence," Robert declared as evening approached. Davis warned them against vigilante action, but Sarah could see that Robert was beyond caution now. After the investigator left, promising to dig deeper into Leonard's background, Robert revealed a small device he'd purchased. "It's a motion-activated camera," he explained. "Wireless with night vision. We're going to place it where it can see that basement window." "Is that legal?" Sarah asked, though she was past caring. "Legal enough," Robert replied grimly. "And if it shows something, anything, we take it straight to the FBI." Under cover of the continuing storm, they crossed to the narrow strip of land between their properties. Robert positioned the camera in a cluster of bushes, angling it toward Leonard's partially obscured basement window. The rain provided perfect cover, drumming loudly enough to mask any sounds they made. As they worked, Sarah glanced up at Leonard's house. Through a gap in the curtains, she caught a glimpse of him standing at his upstairs window, watching the rain. For a heart-stopping moment, she thought he was looking directly at them, but his gaze seemed unfocused, distant. "He's right there," she whispered urgently to Robert upstairs window. Robert froze, then slowly straightened up, using his body to shield their activities. "Camera's set," he murmured. "Let's go." They retreated to Sarah's house, soaked and muddy, but with the camera successfully deployed. Now all they could do was wait, and watch for any evidence that might confirm or dispel their growing suspicion. That Leonard Collins was not the kind neighbor he pretended to be. "If he has her," Robert said quietly as they stood in Sarah's kitchen, dripping onto the floor, "if he's had her all this time right across the street." He didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. The horror of it, the monstrous violation of trust, the unthinkable proximity of predator and prey, hung between them like a physical presence. Across the street, Leonard Collins moved away from his window. He descended the stairs slowly, pausing at the basement door. From behind it came a faint sound, a child humming softly to herself, a familiar lullaby that Sarah used to sing. Leonard smiled as he unlocked the door. "Dinner time, Lily," he called softly. "I've made your favorite." The next 48 hours were the longest of Sarah's life. The camera Robert had placed was designed to upload images to a secure cloud account whenever it detected motion. But so far it had captured nothing of significance. Just the occasional bird landing in the bushes, a neighborhood cat prowling through the yard, and once Leonard himself taking out trash in the rain. Robert had returned to his hotel, monitoring the camera feed remotely while Davis continued his investigation into Leonard's background. Sarah remained alone in her house, a prisoner of her own suspicions and fears. She found herself avoiding windows, terrified that Leonard might somehow sense her watching, might realize they were closing in. On the second night, just as Sarah was about to give up and try to sleep, her phone pinged with an alert from Robert, movement detected at the basement window. With trembling fingers, she opened the image. At first, she saw nothing unusual, just the window, dimly lit from within. Then she zoomed in, and her heart nearly stopped. A small, pale hand was pressed against the glass. A child's hand. Sarah's vision blurred as tears filled her eyes. She tried to call Robert, but her fingers were shaking so badly she could barely operate her phone. When she finally reached him, her voice was a broken whisper. "It's her. It has to be her." "I'm calling the FBI right now," Robert said, his own voice tight with emotion. "Don't do anything, Sarah. Promise me. Wait for the authorities." But even as she agreed, Sarah knew she couldn't wait. Not now. Not when her daughter might be just yards away, separated by nothing more than a street and a wall. The thought of Lily so close, perhaps hearing her mother's voice every day but unable to reach her, was unbearable. Sarah moved on instinct, grabbing her coat and a flashlight. The rational part of her mind screamed that this was dangerous, that Leonard could be violent if confronted, that she should wait for help. But the primal core of her being, the mother who had kept a candle burning for 2 years, would not be denied. The night was clear and cool, the storm having passed, leaving the stars unusually bright above Oak Ridge. Sarah crossed the street directly, not bothering with stealth now. If Leonard was watching, let him see. Let him know she was coming for her daughter. She pounded on his front door, the sound echoing in the quiet neighborhood. No response. She knocked again, harder, calling out his name. The house remained dark and silent. Sarah circled around to the side where a narrow path led to the backyard. The basement window was there, partially hidden by overgrown shrubs. She pushed through them, scratching her arms on the branches until she reached the window. "Lily?" she called softly, pressing her face to the glass. "Lily, are you in there?" The basement beyond was dark now, no sign of the light she'd seen earlier. Sarah shone her flashlight through the window, illuminating a seemingly normal basement, storage boxes, old furniture, a workbench along one wall. Nothing unusual. Nothing to suggest a child was being held captive. Had she imagined the hand? Was grief driving her to see what she desperately wanted to find? Sarah was about to step back when her flashlight beam caught something odd, a section of wall that didn't quite match the rest. The cinder blocks were newer, their color slightly different from the surrounding wall, and there appeared to be a thin seam running along the floor nearby, as if something had been built over the original foundation. A false wall. Sarah's blood ran cold. She needed to get inside now. She looked around frantically for something to break the window with, settling on a heavy garden stone. But just as she raised it, headlights swept across the yard as a car pulled into Leonard's driveway. Sarah froze, caught between the desperate need to reach Lily and the sudden danger of Leonard's return. She ducked down behind the bushes, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through the branches, she watched as Leonard emerged from his car. But he wasn't alone. Sheriff Donovan was with him, the two men engaged in what appeared to be a friendly conversation. "Appreciate the late-night consultation, Mike," Leonard was saying as they approached the front door. "These migraines can be debilitating." "Least I could do," the sheriff replied. "My wife swears by that prescription. Should help you sleep." Sarah couldn't believe what she was seeing. The sheriff, the man who was supposed to be searching for Lily, was on friendly terms with the very person who might have taken her. Had Leonard cultivated this relationship deliberately? Was it possible the sheriff was somehow complicit? No, she decided. More likely, Leonard had carefully built a reputation as a respectable community member, ensuring that even law enforcement saw him as above suspicion. Sarah remained hidden until both men entered the house. Then, keeping low, she made her way back to the street. She needed to think, to plan. Breaking in while Leonard was home and with the sheriff present would be suicidal. Back in her own house, Sarah called Robert with shaking hands. "He's home, and Sheriff Donovan is with him," she reported in a harsh whisper. "But Robert, there's something in that basement. A wall that doesn't look right. Like something built inside the original space." "The FBI is sending a team," Robert told her. "They'll be there by morning. Agent Reeves is leading them personally." She remembers Lily's case. Morning could be too late, Sarah argued. What if he suspects something? What if he moves her? "Sarah, listen to me. If Collins has kept Lily alive for 2 years, he's not going to hurt her now. He's had plenty of opportunities if that was his intention." The logic was sound, but it did nothing to calm the storm of Sarah's emotion. Her daughter was alive. She was certain of it now. And she was being held prisoner just across the street, perhaps able to see her mother's house from that tiny basement window. The thought was almost more than Sarah could bear. "I'm coming over," Robert decided. "You shouldn't be alone right now." While she waited for him, Sarah found herself drawn again to Lily's bedroom. The candle in the window had burned low, its flame guttering in a soft breeze. Sarah stared at it, thinking of all the Sundays she had lit it faithfully, never knowing if Lily could see it, never imagining she might be so close. "I found you," she whispered to the flame. "Hold on just a little longer, baby. Mommy's coming." Robert arrived 30 minutes later, his face grim with purpose. He'd brought Davis with him, the investigator carrying what looked like surveillance equipment. "We're going to monitor every entrance to that house until the FBI arrives," Davis explained, setting up a small camera aimed at Leonard's front door. "If he tries to move her, we'll know." The three of them maintained a vigil through the long night, taking turns watching Leonard's house for any sign of activity. Sarah couldn't sit still, pacing from window to window, imagining what Lily must have endured these past 2 years. So close, yet utterly unreachable. Around 3 in the morning, lights came on briefly in Leonard's kitchen, then went out again. An hour later, his bedroom light flickered on. Normal movements of a restless sleeper or something more sinister. "What if he knows?" Sarah whispered. "What if he's destroying evidence right now?" "The FBI's been building a case since I contacted them," Robert assured her. "They've been monitoring his online activities, his bank records. If there's anything to find, they'll find it. Dawn was breaking when a convoy of unmarked vehicles rolled quietly into Oak Ridge. Agent Reeves emerged from the lead car, her face set with determination as she approached Sarah's house. "Mrs. Anderson," she greeted Sarah with a formal nod. "We have a search warrant for Leonard Collins' property based on new evidence." "What evidence?" Sarah asked, her voice hoarse from a sleepless night. Agent Reeves hesitated, then explained. "Davis's background check flagged some inconsistencies in Collins' history. He's not who he claims to be. His real name is Leonard Caldwell, and he has a sealed juvenile record from the 1960s. Sarah felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "You think he's taken other children?" "We don't know yet," Agent Reeves replied carefully. "But we're taking no chances. I need you to stay here while we execute the warrant." "But she's my daughter," Sarah protested. "And if she's in there, you'll be the first to see her," Agent Reeves promised. "But we need to secure the scene properly, for Lily's sake." As the FBI team moved into position surrounding Leonard's house with quiet efficiency, Sarah stood on her porch, Robert beside her, both of them hardly daring to breathe. This moment, this reckoning, had been 2 years coming. Across the street, Leonard Collins opened his front door to find Agent Reeves standing there, a warrant in her hand and armed agents at her back. "Leonard Caldwell," she said, using his real name like a weapon. "We have a warrant to search these premises in connection with the disappearance of Lily Anderson." Leonard's face remained impassive, betraying nothing as he stepped aside to let them enter. Only Sarah, watching from across the street, caught the slight tremor in his hands as he adjusted his glasses one last time. The seconds stretched into agonizing minutes as Sarah and Robert watched the FBI team enter Leonard's house. Neighbors began emerging onto their porches, drawn by the unusual activity. Whispers spread quickly through the small community. Was this related to Lily's disappearance? After 2 years, had there been a break in the case? Sarah stood frozen, her eyes fixed on Leonard's front door. He had gone inside with the agents, vanishing from view. What was happening in there? Had they found the false wall she'd glimpsed? Had they found Lily? Agent Reeves had stationed an officer outside Sarah's house, ostensibly for her protection, but clearly also to prevent her from rushing across the street. The young agent, barely out of training by the look of him, shifted uncomfortably under Sarah's desperate gaze. "Ma'am, they'll notify us as soon as they know anything," he assured her. 20 minutes passed, then 30. The wait was unbearable. Sarah paced her porch, alternating between desperate hope and paralyzing fear. What if she was wrong? What if the hand she'd seen was just a shadow, a trick of light and desperate longing? "Something's happening," Robert said suddenly, pointing across the street. The front door of Leonard's house had opened. 2 agents emerged, moving with purpose toward one of the vehicles. They retrieved what looked like specialized equipment. Sarah couldn't tell exactly what it was, but it seemed heavy and technical. "Ground-penetrating radar," the young agent explained, noticing her questioning look. "They use it to detect anomalies beneath floors or behind walls." Sarah's stomach clenched. They were looking for hidden spaces, or worse, for remains. The possibility that they might find Lily's body rather than Lily herself hit her with physical force, nearly doubling her over. "She's alive," Robert said firmly, as if reading her thoughts. "We saw her hand." Another agonizing hour crawled by. More neighbors had gathered at a respectful distance, held back by local police who had arrived to assist the FBI. Sarah recognized faces she'd known for years. People who had searched for Lily, who had brought food, who had offered prayers and support. They watched in somber silence, the collective hope and dread of the community made visible. Finally, at 9:17 a.m., Sarah would always remember the exact time, Agent Reeves emerged from Leonard's house. Her face was unreadable as she crossed the street directly toward Sarah's porch. Behind her, agents continued to move in and out of Leonard's house with evident purpose, but there was no sign of Leonard himself. Sarah couldn't breathe as Agent Reeves approached. This was the moment that would either resurrect her life or destroy it forever. "Mrs. Anderson," Agent Reeves began, her professional demeanor softening slightly, "we've discovered a concealed room in the basement of Mr. Collins' house." Sarah gripped the porch railing to keep from collapsing. "And?" she managed to ask, though her voice was barely audible. Agent Reeves paused, then said the words Sarah had been waiting 2 years to hear. "We found a child. A girl. We believe it's Lily." The world seemed to tilt and spin around Sarah. "Is she?" She couldn't finish the question. "She's alive," Agent Reeves confirmed quickly. "She's being evaluated by medical personnel right now. She appears physically unharmed, but understandably traumatized." "I need to see her," Sarah insisted, already moving toward the steps. "She needs me." Agent Reeves nodded. "That's why I'm here. We're bringing her out now, and she'll be transported to Memorial Hospital for thorough examination. You can ride with her in the ambulance." Robert let out a sound somewhere between a sob and a laugh, running his hands through his hair in disbelief. "She's really alive? After all this time? Right across the street?" "Yes," Agent Reeves confirmed. The concealed room was professionally constructed, likely years before Lily's abduction. It appears Collins, or Caldwell rather, had been planning this for some time. Sarah barely heard these details. All that mattered was that Lily was alive. Her daughter had survived. Everything else, the how and why of her captivity, the monster who had taken her, was secondary to that miraculous fact. Across the street, movement at Leonard's front door caught her attention. A group of agents emerged, forming a protective circle around a small figure wrapped in a blanket. Even from a distance, Sarah recognized her daughter instantly, the way she carried herself, the shape of her head, the glimpse of brown hair. Lily. The name tore from Sarah's throat as she broke into a run, brushing past Agent Reeves, ignoring the young officer who tried half-heartedly to stop her. The agents parted as Sarah approached, understanding this was a moment no protocol could delay. And then suddenly, Lily was there before her, thinner, paler, her eyes huge in her face, but unmistakably wonderfully alive. "Mom?" Lily's voice was small, uncertain, as if she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. Sarah dropped to her knees, bringing herself to Lily's eye level. She wanted to gather her daughter into her arms, to never let go again, but she forced herself to move slowly, aware of the trauma Lily had endured. "It's me, baby," she said softly, tears streaming down her face. "I'm here. You're safe now." Lily stared at her for one heartbreaking moment, then lurched forward into her mother's arms with a sob that seemed to contain 2 years of suppressed emotion. Sarah held her daughter tightly, feeling the 2 prominent bones beneath the blanket, smelling the unfamiliar soap in her hair, but recognizing beneath it all the essential liliness that no captivity could erase. "I saw your candle," Lily whispered against Sarah's shoulder. "Every Sunday. I could see it from my window." Sarah's heart constricted. The candle had served its purpose after all, not to guide Lily home, but to let her know she wasn't forgotten, that someone was still searching. Medical personnel approached gently, explaining that Lily needed to go to the hospital. Sarah nodded, never loosening her grip on her daughter as they walked toward the waiting ambulance. Robert joined them, his face streaked with tears as he gazed at the daughter he had almost lost forever. "Dad?" Lily seemed surprised to see him. "Hey, kiddo," Robert managed, his voice breaking. "You've got a lot of people who missed you." As they reached the ambulance, Sarah caught a glimpse of Leonard being led from his house in handcuffs. His head was bowed, his shoulders slumped in defeat, but as the officers guided him toward a waiting police car, he looked up, his eyes meeting Sarah's across the distance between them. There was no remorse in that gaze, no shame or regret, only a cold, possessive anger that sent a chill through Sarah's body. This man had stolen 2 years of her daughter's life. He had watched Sarah grieve day after day, had comforted her, had pretended to search while keeping Lily prisoner just yards away. Sarah turned away, focusing instead on her daughter. Leonard Collins, or whatever his real name was, would face justice. But right now, all that mattered was Lily. In the ambulance, as paramedics checked Lily's vital signs, Sarah held her daughter's hand, unwilling to break physical contact even for a moment. Lily seemed equally reluctant to let go, her fingers gripping Sarah's with surprising strength. "How did you find me?" Lily asked quietly. "He said no one was looking anymore. He said you'd given up." "Never," Sarah said fiercely. "I never stopped looking for you. Not for one single day." "I tried to escape," Lily told her, her voice small but steady. 3 times. He caught me every time. Then he put better locks on everything." Sarah swallowed hard, fighting back a fresh wave of tears at the thought of her daughter's failed attempts at freedom. "You're so brave, Lily. So incredibly brave." At the hospital, doctors whisked Lily away for examination, gently but firmly insisting that Sarah wait outside. It was the hardest thing she'd ever done, letting go of Lily's hand after just finding her again. Robert stayed with her in the waiting room, both of them shell-shocked by the morning's events. "I still can't believe it," Robert said, shaking his head. "All this time, right across the street." "He watched me grieve," Sarah said, anger finally breaking through the numbness. "He brought me food. He talked about her like he was concerned, all while he had her locked in his basement." Agent Reeves joined them, offering coffee, which both refused. "We'll need to interview Lily," she explained gently. "Not today, but soon. We need to understand exactly what happened." "What do you know about him?" Robert asked. "About Leonard? Why did he do this?" Agent Reeves hesitated, then seemed to decide they deserved answers. "Leonard Caldwell had a sealed juvenile record for an incident involving a young girl when he was 17. Nothing as serious as abduction, but concerning enough that it should have raised flags. He changed his name legally in the 1980s, which is why it didn't come up in our initial investigation. But why Lily?" Sarah asked, the question that had haunted her for 2 years. "Why my daughter?" "From what we've found in his house so far, he appears to have been fixated on the idea of having a daughter," Agent Reeves said carefully. "There were journals, plans dating back years. He chose Lily deliberately, watched her for months before taking her." The doctor emerged before Sarah could process this horrifying information. "Mrs. Anderson, your daughter's asking for you." Sarah was on her feet instantly. "How is she?" "Physically, she's malnourished, but not severely. No signs of physical abuse. Psychologically," the doctor's expression softened. "That's going to take time, but having you with her will help enormously." In a private room, Lily sat on the edge of an examination table, looking small in a hospital gown. When she saw Sarah, her face lit up with such naked relief that Sarah felt her heart might burst. "I was afraid you weren't real," Lily confessed as Sarah rushed to her side. "That I dreamed you finding me." "I'm real," Sarah assured her, taking Lily's hand and pressing it to her cheek. "And I'm never leaving your side again." Outside the hospital, news vans were already gathering as word spread of the miraculous discovery. The story of Lily Anderson, found alive after 2 years, held captive across the street from her own home, would soon captivate the nation. But inside that quiet hospital room, there was only a mother and daughter, reunited against impossible odds. Beginning the long journey back to each other, the hospital became a fortress of privacy in the days that followed. Media trucks lined the perimeter, reporters desperate for the first interview with the family of the miracle girl who had been found alive after 2 years. The story had exploded across national news networks, the shocking proximity of Lily's captivity just across the street from her own home capturing the public's horrified fascination. Inside, behind drawn curtains and guarded doors, Lily began the slow process of reacclimating to freedom. The doctors had kept her for observation, concerned about both her physical condition and psychological state. Sarah never left her side, sleeping in a chair beside Lily's bed, waking at the slightest sound to reassure her daughter that she was safe, that this wasn't a dream. On the 3rd day, Agent Reeves arrived with a child psychologist named Dr. Meredith Chun. They needed to interview Lily to understand what had happened during those 2 years. Sarah had dreaded this moment, but knew it was necessary, not just for the case against Leonard, but also for Lily's recovery. "We'll be very gentle, Doctor," Chun promised as they prepared. "And you could stay with her the entire time, Mrs. Anderson." Lily sat cross-legged on her hospital bed, looking younger than her 14 years in oversized pajamas donated by hospital staff. Her long brown hair had been cut short during her captivity, growing out now in uneven layers that Sarah had tried to smooth with a borrowed brush. "You don't have to talk about anything that makes you uncomfortable," Sarah assured her daughter as Agent Reeves set up a small recording device. Lily nodded, her fingers plucking at the blanket covering her legs. "I want to tell," she said quietly. "I want him to go to jail forever." Dr. Chun began with simple questions about Lily's daily routine in captivity, about the space she was kept in, about her basic needs. Lily answered with surprising composure, describing a room roughly 8 feet by 10 feet with a small bathroom attached. There had been a bed, a desk, some books, and a tiny window set high in the wall, the window where Sarah had seen her hand. "He made me follow a schedule," Lily explained. "Wake up at 7 o'clock, exercise for 30 minutes, breakfast at 8 o'clock, then schoolwork until noon." "He gave you schoolwork?" Agent Reeves asked, careful to keep her tone neutral. Lily nodded. "He said I couldn't fall behind. He brought textbooks and worksheets. I had to complete them all correctly, or..." She trailed off, her composure faltering for the first time. "Or what, Lily?" Dr. Chun prompted gently. "Or no dinner," Lily finished. "And sometimes he'd turn off the light for days." Sarah closed her eyes briefly, fighting back rage at the psychological torture her daughter had endured. Leonard hadn't physically harmed Lily, but he had controlled her utterly, wielding darkness and isolation as weapons. "Can you tell us about the night he took you?" Agent Reeves asked. Lily's hand found Sarah's, squeezing tightly. "I woke up because something smelled sweet, like candy, but stronger. There was a cloth over my face. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. The next thing I remember is waking up in that room." "Chloroform," Agent Reeves noted. "And then what happened?" "He told me he was saving me," Lily said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "He said my mom didn't want me anymore, that she'd asked him to take me away. I didn't believe him, but he showed me newspapers with articles about my disappearance. He'd highlighted parts to make it sound like Mom wasn't looking very hard." Sarah felt physically ill at this revelation. "Oh, Lily. I knew it wasn't true," Lily assured her quickly. "I could see our house from my window. I saw you putting up flyers. And every Sunday you lit the candle." The interview continued for an hour, with breaks whenever Lily seemed overwhelmed. She described how Leonard had gradually allowed her privileges for good behavior: books, colored pencils, occasionally a radio that only received one station. He brought her meals 3 times a day, always sitting and watching her eat, making conversation as if they were a normal family. "He wanted me to call him Dad," Lily said, disgust evident in her voice. "I never did. Not once." "How did you communicate with the outside world?" Dr. Chun asked. "Did you try to signal anyone?" "The window was too high to see out of properly," Lily explained. "I could only reach it if I stood on my desk, and he would check to make sure it hadn't been moved. But sometimes, when I knew he was gone, I would try anyway." Her voice caught. "That's when I saw the camera in the bushes. I pressed my hand against the glass, hoping someone would see." Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand, thinking of that small, pale hand that had changed everything. "We saw you, baby. That's how we knew." As the interview wound down, Agent Reeves shared some information about Leonard that she felt Lily should know. His real name is Leonard Caldwell. He changed it legally many years ago. He's been planning something like this for a very long time, Lily. What happened to you wasn't your fault, and there was nothing you could have done to prevent it. I know, Lily said with surprising firmness. He's crazy. He told me once that I was the daughter he should have had, that he'd been watching me for years, waiting until I was old enough to understand what he was doing for me. The words sent a chill through the room. How long had Leonard been observing Lily, calculating, planning? The thought that he had been in their lives, watching her daughter grow, waiting for the right moment to strike, made Sarah's skin crawl. When the interview concluded, Dr. Chun stayed behind to talk with Lily privately about coping strategies and healing, while Agent Reeves asked to speak with Sarah in the hallway. We've completed our search of Collins, or rather, Caldwell's house, she informed Sarah. What we found was disturbing. Sarah steeled herself. Tell me. The hidden room was just the beginning. We found detailed journals dating back 5 years before Lily's abduction. He'd been planning this meticulously. There were photographs of Lily at school, in your yard, at the community center. He'd been stalking her, learning her routines. Sarah felt her knees weaken. 5 years? That means he started watching her when she was only 7. Agent Reeves nodded grimly. There's more. The room where he kept Lily wasn't the first such space he'd constructed. We found evidence that he's lived in at least 3 other locations with similar hidden rooms. We're investigating whether there might have been other victims. The implications were horrifying. Had Leonard taken other children before Lily? Were there other families out there still searching, still grieving, unaware that their children had been held by this monster? What will happen to him now? Sarah asked. He's being held without bail. The evidence against him is overwhelming. Between the physical evidence, his journals, and Lily's testimony, he'll never see the outside of a prison again, Agent Reeves assured her. Sarah should have felt relief, but all she felt was a hollow exhaustion. Justice for Lily wouldn't erase the 2 years of captivity, the psychological scars that might never fully heal. When Sarah returned to Lily's room, Dr. Chun was just leaving. She's remarkable, the psychologist told Sarah quietly. Her resilience is extraordinary, but the road ahead won't be easy. She needs consistent therapy, patience, and understanding. Inside, Lily was sitting by the window, looking out at the world she'd been denied for 2 years. When she heard Sarah enter, she turned, a question in her eyes. Can we go home soon? She asked. Home. The word held such weight now. Sarah hadn't set foot in their house since Lily had been found, unwilling to leave the hospital even for a moment. If the doctors say it's okay, Sarah replied, joining her daughter by the window. But Lily, I've been thinking, maybe we should find a new home, a fresh start somewhere else. Lily considered this, her gaze returning to the window. I want to go back to our house, she said after a moment, just for a little while. I need to see my room again, to know that it was real, that my life before him was real. Sarah understood. Lily needed closure, needed to reclaim the spaces and memories that Leonard had tried to erase with his lies. Okay, she agreed. We'll go home first. Then we'll decide together what comes next. Outside the hospital room, Robert was speaking with Lily's medical team. He'd been a constant presence, shuttling between the hospital and hotel, handling the press inquiries that Sarah refused to acknowledge, coordinating with law enforcement. Their shared crises had forged a new understanding between them, old wounds set aside in the face of Lily's needs. That evening as Lily slept, Sarah stood at the hospital window looking out at the lights of Oak Ridge. Somewhere out there was their house, with Lily's room preserved exactly as it had been 2 years ago. Across the street was Leonard's house, now a crime scene, its secrets laid bare. The community had been shattered by the revelation that such evil had existed in their midst. The trusted neighbor, the helpful friend, the man who had searched alongside them, all a calculated facade, concealing a predator. Sarah thought of all the times Leonard had sat at her kitchen table, offering comfort while knowing exactly where Lily was. All the times he had watched her grief, perhaps even taking pleasure in it. The violation went beyond the abduction of her daughter. He had invaded their lives completely, feeding on their pain while presenting himself as their savior. The doctors had tentatively scheduled Lily's release for the following day. Soon they would return to a world forever altered, not just by Lily's abduction and captivity, but by her miraculous return. How would they navigate this new reality with its media attention and community scrutiny? How would Lily adjust to freedom after 2 years of rigid control? Sarah didn't have all the answers, but as she watched her daughter sleep peacefully for the first time since her rescue, she made a silent promise. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The candle that had burned faithfully in Lily's window for 2 years had served its purpose. Now it was time to build a new light, one that would guide them both forward into healing. The day of Lily's release from the hospital dawned bright and clear, almost offensively beautiful compared to the darkness they had endured. Sarah had spent the previous night making arrangements, coordinating with the police for security, ensuring their house was ready, and preparing for the media gauntlet they would inevitably face. Dr. Chun had provided firm guidance: protect Lily's privacy, maintain routines, allow her to set the pace for reintegration, and most importantly, be honest. Children who experience trauma need truth, even when it's difficult, she had explained. Lies, even well-intentioned ones, only create more uncertainty in a world that already feels unstable to them. Lily sat on the edge of her hospital bed, dressed in new clothes Robert had purchased, jeans, sneakers, and a simple blue sweater. At 14, she was caught between childhood and adolescence, her body having continued to grow during captivity despite malnourishment. The little girl who had disappeared was gone forever, replaced by this quieter, more watchful young woman. "Ready?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice light despite the momentous nature of the day. Lily nodded, fidgeting with the sleeve of her sweater. "Will there be a lot of people outside?" "Some," Sarah admitted. "But we don't have to talk to anyone. The police will help us get to the car and we can go straight home." "Home," Lily repeated, testing the word. "It feels strange, like something from a dream." Agent Reeves arrived to escort them, accompanied by 2 other agents. "We've arranged for a back exit," she explained. "There's considerable media presence at the main entrance." They moved through the hospital corridors, Lily staying close to Sarah's side, her eyes darting nervously at each new person they passed. News of her discharge had been kept confidential, but Sarah noticed how hospital staff paused in their duties to watch them pass, their expressions a mixture of wonder and sympathy. At the service entrance, a black SUV with tinted windows waited. Robert stood beside it, having gone ahead to ensure everything was ready. "All set," he confirmed as they approached. "The house is secure." Lily hesitated at the sight of the vehicle, her breathing quickening. "Is it far?" she asked, a tremor in her voice. Sarah immediately understood. After 2 years in a confined space, the prospect of being in a car with limited escape options might feel threatening. "Just a 15-minute drive," she assured her daughter. "You can sit by the window. We can even roll it down if you want fresh air." Lily took a deep breath, then nodded, her jaw set with determination. "Okay, I can do this." The drive through Oak Ridge was surreal. The town Lily had last seen as a 12-year-old had changed in subtle ways. New storefronts, different traffic patterns, houses repainted. She pressed her face to the window, drinking in these details with quiet intensity. The bookstore closed, she observed as they passed the empty storefront where she had once spent Saturday afternoons browsing. "Last year," Sarah confirmed. "But there's a new one opening on Maple Street." They turned onto their street and Lily suddenly gripped Sarah's hand. Ahead on the right was their modest 2-story home, looking exactly as it had 2 years ago. And across from it, surrounded by police tape and still showing signs of the FBI search, was Leonard's house. Lily's face strained of color as she stared at the place of her captivity. "He could see our house the whole time," she whispered. From his front window, he could see everything. "We don't have to stay here," Robert said quickly from the front seat. "This was just to get your things, to see your room. We can go to a hotel after if you want." Lily shook her head, her expression hardening. "No, I want to go home. Doesn't get to take that from me, too." Several police officers were stationed outside their house, keeping the small gathering of reporters and curious neighbors at a respectful distance. The SUV pulled into the driveway and the officers immediately moved to form a barrier, allowing the family to enter the house without being photographed or approached. Inside, Sarah watched Lily closely as she took in the familiar surroundings. The living room was just as she remembered it, though there were more photographs on the mantel now, pictures of Lily that Sarah had enlarged and displayed during the search, as if to manifest her daughter's return through sheer force of will. "It smells the same," Lily said softly, running her fingers along the back of the sofa. Sarah hadn't thought about that, how the sensory details of home would affect Lily after so long away. The familiar sense of the fabric softener Sarah always used, the faint pine from the wooden floors, the lingering aroma of the cinnamon candles she favored. These were the invisible threads of home that no photograph could capture. Lily moved through the first floor slowly, reacquainting herself with spaces that had once been as familiar as her own skin. She paused at the kitchen table, touching the surface lightly. "He sat here," she said, her voice suddenly hard. "Didn't he? After he took me." Sarah hesitated, then nodded, remembering Dr. Chun's advice about honesty. "Yes. He brought food sometimes, said he wanted to help." Lily's hand curled into a fist against the tabletop. "He would tell me about it. About how sad you were. How you cried. He liked talking about it. The casual cruelty of it, Leonard recounting Sarah's grief to the very child whose absence had caused it, was breathtaking." Sarah struggled to find words that wouldn't betray the rage she felt. "He can't hurt either of us anymore," she said finally. "He's gone for good." After a moment, Lily nodded and turned toward the stairs. "I want to see my room now." Sarah and Robert exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. He would wait downstairs, giving them privacy for this crucial moment. Lily ascended the stairs slowly, trailing her hand along the banister. At the top, she paused, looking down the hallway toward her bedroom door, which stood slightly ajar. The distance seemed to stretch before her, and for a moment Sarah thought she might turn back. Instead, Lily squared her shoulders and walked forward with deliberate steps. At the threshold of her bedroom, she stopped, her hand on the doorknob. "I used to dream about this room," she said quietly. "Every detail. I was afraid I'd forget what it looked like." She pushed the door open and Sarah held her breath. The room was exactly as Lily had left it that fateful night, the unmade bed with its purple comforter, posters of bands and movies that had been popular 2 years ago, the bookshelf stuffed with well-worn paperbacks, the desk where half-finished homework still waited. The only addition was the candle in the window, which Sarah had continued to light every Sunday without fail. Lily stood motionless in the center of the room, turning slowly to take it all in. Her eyes lingered on each item, each memory preserved in this time capsule of her 12-year-old life. "My books," she said, moving to the shelf. He would only let me have one at a time. He chose them. Said some books weren't appropriate. She pulled out a dog-eared copy of The Hobbit, clutching it to her chest. "I miss these so much." Sarah watched as Lily rediscovered her possessions, each one a piece of her identity that Leonard had tried to erase. There was anger in some of her reactions, sadness in others, but also flashes of joy, a small, tentative happiness at being reunited with the tangible remnants of her interrupted life. When Lily reached the window, she touched the candle gently. "I could see this from his basement. Not clearly, just the light. But I knew it was you. I knew you were waiting." Every Sunday, Sarah confirmed, her voice thick with emotion. "It was my promise to you." Lily turned to face her mother, tears streaming down her face for the first time since her rescue. "I never gave up either. I knew you'd find me. Even when he said everyone had stopped looking, I knew you wouldn't." Sarah crossed the room and wrapped her arms around her daughter, holding her as she finally released the emotions she'd been controlling so carefully in the hospital. Lily's body shook with sobs, the full weight of her ordeal seemingly crashing down now that she was in the safety of her own room, her own home. "I hate him," Lily cried against Sarah's shoulder. "I hate what he took from me. 2 years, Mom. 2 whole years." "I know, baby," Sarah whispered, stroking her daughter's hair. "It's okay to be angry. It's okay to hate him." They stood like that for a long time, until Lily's tears subsided and she pulled back, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her new sweater. "Can I take a shower?" she asked suddenly. "A real shower, with hot water for as long as I want." The simple request broke Sarah's heart. Even the most basic freedoms, the choice of when to bathe, how long to stay in the water, had been controlled by Leonard. "Of course," Sarah said. "Take all the time you need. There are new towels in the cabinet, and I put some different shampoos in there since I wasn't sure what you'd like now." As Lily gathered what she needed, Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the bittersweet reality of having her daughter home. Lily was back, but changed. The innocent child who had disappeared was gone, replaced by a survivor with wounds that might never fully heal. Yet amid the grief for what had been lost, Sarah felt a fierce pride in her daughter's strength. Lily had endured the unthinkable and emerged with her spirit intact. Whatever challenges lay ahead, that resilience would light their way forward. From downstairs came the sound of the doorbell, followed by Robert's voice speaking to someone at the door. A few moments later, he called up, "Sarah, Agent Reeves is here. She says it's important." Sarah hesitated, reluctant to leave Lily alone even for a moment. "It's okay, Mom," Lily said, reading her expression. "I'll be fine. I just want a normal shower in my normal bathroom. I'll be right downstairs," Sarah promised. "Just call if you need anything." Downstairs, Agent Reeves waited in the living room, her expression grave. "Mrs. Anderson, I apologize for the intrusion on your first day home, but there's been a development I thought you should hear from me directly." "What is it?" Sarah asked, a new fear clutching at her heart. "We've identified another victim," Agent Reeves said quietly. "A girl who went missing in Nebraska in 1998. We found her school photo in a hidden compartment in Leonard's basement, along with other trophies." Sarah sank onto the sofa, the implications washing over her. "Did she? Is she? We don't know yet," Agent Reeves admitted. "We're reopening the investigation. But Mrs. Anderson, based on what we're finding, we believe Leonard Caldwell may have been doing this for decades. Lily may be the only survivor.